this is who I am. I'm British. I'm a drinker. Looking back through all of those different years, there was an element of boredom. There was an element of not knowing what I was doing with my life. There was, of course, the environment. There was peer pressure. There was the fact that at every stage of my life, whether I was in college, whether I was in the village, whether I was at university or traveling or at work, alcohol was one of the, or if not the only outlet when it came to social time.
Welcome, Mike, to the Inside Addiction podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Luke, and I'm really excited and happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. Tell us a bit about your story and how drinking kind of came into your life.
Well, I grew up in a small village in North Wales, and my family life was pretty idyllic, you might say. My parents were together. I had my bigger brother. We lived in a small village. There was nothing much other than a big football field to play in. And so I spent most of my childhood there. I loved sports, loved football. And in terms of alcohol, there really wasn't any alcohol in our home at all. And I was thinking about this morning, actually, as to why there was no alcohol in our home. And it kind of sparked the memory that my mum, I kind of vaguely remember my mum once telling me that her dad, so my granddad, he had to be putting his mum to bed because she would be drunk before his dad, so my great-grandfather, got home, because my great-grandfather, I think this is the story, was a heavy drinker. So if he'd got home and found my great-grandma drunk, then there would be domestic violence. So my grandfather, so this is stuff that was happening, in the 1930s, I guess. So, 100 years ago almost. So that impacted my granddad. Now, my granddad could have gone one of two ways, I'm sure. He could have taken that experience of growing up in a household of alcoholism and domestic violence, and he could have drank himself and gone down that path. But as it turned out, my mum told me that there was never any alcohol at home when she grew up, because my granddad took the other path and he decided that he wasn't going to drink. And I don't remember, other than kind of Christmas, when he might have had a beer with Christmas dinner. So that kind of followed through into our family life. So there was never really any alcohol in our home. My dad, if we ever went out for a meal, my dad would have a half pint of lager. My mum would have a small white wine. There was perhaps one bottle of whiskey in the house that remained there throughout my childhood and adolescence. And once, actually, when I was about 17, tried to add milk to some of it to mix it, to take it out, which is not something that works. But yeah, so there was no alcohol at all at home. I had a great childhood. I loved football. I loved sports. But when I was about 16, I had a detached retina, 2 detached retinas, actually. And it completely derailed anything that I thought I knew, because I knew I wanted to kind of go, do sports. I really wanted to play football. That's what I dreamt about doing it. I wanted to do it professionally, but, I probably wouldn't have. But that was the direction. And when I was 16 years old, I had this operation. And from one day to the next, I was told, you'll never do, you'll never play football. Well, you won't play football again for at least 5 years. You're not doing any more PE. And I had 3 months off school during my GCSE years. So it was during that time that I really lost myself, really. I didn't know what I was going to do when I left school, because I obviously wasn't going to do sports or football anymore. And while I was kind of in recovery, I had to spend 3 months at home. I kind of got into music. I started to teach myself to play the guitar. And I got into art. I could draw. When my sight came back after the operation, I found I could draw. That was a nice quiet activity that I could do in a dim light with just a little lamp. So I kind of went down this art and kind of music path, if you like. And so I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But then I went to college when I was like 17, I think, around A levels time. I went to the local college to do an art course and discovered like a huge partying scene. So a lot of my friends from school had gone there. There were other people as well from other local schools, and we got into going to the clubs, as you do when you're 18, 17 years old, going to the clubs, going to the pubs. And so 3 times a week on a Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, we'd be going out drinking 8 cans of the 500 ml cans before we went anywhere. So that was 3 times a week. And then you'd get to the club, and then obviously you'd have a few drinks when you got there. But the idea was to save money. You'd drink everything beforehand, arrive drunk, and then you didn't have to buy so much alcohol when you were there. And the other kind of environment that I found myself in, apart from college, was being at home in the village as an 18-year-old with nothing to do. So I was doing this course, and I had my friends in the village, and what we did was we went to the pubs because the weather in North Wales, especially in the winter, doesn't kind of make you want to go out and go exercise or meet up on a field. So we all ended up in the pub. And so when you put those two things together, I had this environment of college and this environment of the local pubs in the village, and just boredom, really. There was a number of years between kind of 17 and 21, 22, where I was in and out of kind of dead-end factory jobs, in and out of college, no real plan, no real kind of idea of what I wanted to do, a lot of boredom. And that meant that what we ended up doing most of the time was sitting around and just having a few pints. Around 18 or 19 years old, on one of these nights out, I ended up, I think I was kind of sick with a cold anyway, and I ended up sleeping in a shed overnight, completely drunk. I'd gone to some girl's house, and her dad had kicked me out, and so I slept in the shed, and it was the middle of winter, and I got pneumonia. So I woke up one morning with it felt like forks were being stabbed into my chest, and went to the hospital. They said, "You've got pneumonia." And part of my 3 days I was there, they asked me how much alcohol I drank, and I had never actually done the sums, if you like, and put it together. So I kind of reckoned it was around about 30 pints per week, which was about 90 units. And the UK, they recommend 14, so I was drinking about 6.5 times the recommended weekly allowance, and that was on a weekly basis for years on end. Around that time, I also got arrested for being drunk and disorderly, spent a night in the police cells. Whereas anyone who knows me will know that I'm probably the least likely person to end up in a police cell. But there you go, drunk and disorderly, arrested for that. I also got into a bit of an altercation with a group who chased me and a group of my friends. And I got punched and kicked to the ground, completely drunk, of course. Don't remember any of it. Woke up in the hospital with a big cut over my eye. So alcohol was really kind of, at that early age, was starting to cause some kind of major kind of problems, led to this pneumonia, led to this, ended up in a police cell, ended up in hospital. That's what you do. That's who I was. I was 18 years old. I grew up in North Wales. That's what all my friends were doing. They were doing it in college. They were doing it in the village. It was like this identity. Well, this is who we are, and this is what we do. What else should I be doing? I'm young. I should be going out and having a good time. So eventually I ended up taking a job in another factory, and I joined a band when I was about 21, 22. So it meant I stopped going out to the clubs, and we started to stay at home a lot. And we started smoking an awful lot of weed and continued to drink. And it was around this time, around 21, 22, when I started to experience serious kind of anxiety and panic attacks. And I remember I woke up on one particular occasion in the middle of the night after my 21st birthday, actually. I still have no idea what it was. I felt like my brain was going to explode. I think maybe now it might have been a panic attack brought on by excessive, drinking, because people have been buying me shots all night. So I was, from that moment, I kind of entered this new phase inside my head where I had these repetitive thoughts and feelings. My head felt very heavy. I felt anxious. And the only thing that would kind of relieve the anxiety was having a few drinks. So it's that kind of catch-22, really, where the anxiety that I was, I believe was caused by the alcohol, by the smoking. But the only thing that was relieving the anxiety was to have a few drinks. And like I say, the anxiety got so bad that I ended up going to hospital, joining a local group organised by the social services, just to try and get to the root of the problem. But it was affecting me not just in my thoughts, these repetitive negative thoughts that would just go round and round and round, and it was always the same thought that was like, why am I like this? Why do I feel like this? How can I get out of this pattern? Why do I feel like this? Is this normal? Am I always going to feel like this? And these patterns and the brain, the research I've done recently, the brain always kind of, most of your thoughts are repetitive. And so when your thoughts are anxious and negative, then you just build on that, and it becomes a very kind of a cog, it's very kind of easy to get into that pattern. And so I still had this, no real plan, no real identity. I was in this dead end job. I was drinking. I was in the band. I was anxious. I'd lost a lot of weight because the anxiety caused me to not be able to drink. To eat. So I'd come down to about 57 kilograms, which is 9 stone, about 125 pounds. And I didn't know, what I was going to do. And in the end, I moved back to my parents' house and I went back to college and managed to get a place at university, which was a step in the right direction. And that was really hard for me because at that time I was like 26 and I went and joined the first year at uni where a lot of people were kind of 19. So that was really hard for me because I was suffering a lot with anxiety. But of course, I went to university with a lot of 19-year-olds. And first university and third year, it was just more drinking. So I went back into another environment where alcohol was just so prevalent. So I continued with the drinking. I took a gap year, a gap summer, really. I went out with my friend out to Australia for the summer between my first and second year of studying. And the first night that we arrived, we got blind drunk. I lost my wallet, had some money stolen. It was just one car crash after another, really. But that summer, that trip did kind of give me a little bit more confidence, if you like. And when I came back from that trip, I met a girl who turned out to be my long-term girlfriend and is now my wife. She comes from Germany. So I would take some trips over to Germany. And again, Germany is another culture where alcohol is huge. They're a big drinking nation. So again, every step I was taking, every environment I found in the culture and the community and what we did on a daily basis. Every evening we'd be out having drinks, or we'd going out for a meal and having drinks, or meeting friends and having drinks, or going to a gig and having drinks. And when I eventually graduated from university in 2004, I started work in a creative studio, and the culture there again was drinking. So after work, we would work extremely hard. We'd finish work maybe sometimes at 7 o'clock at night. and then we'd go straight to the pub round the corner. That's where, that's where we talked about the business. That's where we talked about the clients. That's where we talked about the projects. And around that time, my anxiety was getting much better. I had a job, I had a little bit of focus, and I was even starting to get a little bit overweight then, because we were doing nothing other than sitting at work, we'd be, eating kind of Subway and chippy dinners, and then going to the pub and drinking 4 or 5 pints in the evening. And that was on a very regular basis. In 2009, my wife and I took a sabbatical. We went backpacking around the world, which was, again, another kind of big alcohol kind of infused kind of cultural kind of situation. We found ourselves on this tour, 7 weeks, traveling across South America with another group of younger people. Every night was, sitting around by the campfire having drinks. And, that continued. And we came back from that trip, went back to the UK. We actually got married. And then in 2012, we actually sold all of our stuff. We'd loved our trip. We'd fallen in love with traveling. And we sold everything we owned and took a one-way ticket to Thailand in 2012. And things kind of really improved for me in terms of my anxiety, my mental health improved. We had kind of direction. We were on this big adventure. We were still drinking, but it wasn't anything like we'd had before, because I was in a completely different environment. I was only with my wife. She liked to drink as well, but together we wouldn't drink an awful lot. And so I'd managed to put a lot of the heavy drinking behind me, but there were still days where we did drink too much. And then we did that for 3.5 years. We traveled all around Asia for 3.5 years. We passed through Nepal, then flew over to Mexico and traveled through Central America for about 9 months. And it all culminated about after 3.5 years travel. We decided we want to start a family. We traveled to Barcelona by ship, across the Atlantic. There was also all alcohol included. So for 2 weeks, we could drink as much as we like on this ship. We arrived in Barcelona, which is where we live now, after 3.5 years on the road. I turned 40, and my wife said, I'm pregnant, which was, what we were planning. And I had this huge kind of like panic attack, if you like. All the anxiety came flooding back. It was like, I'm going to be a dad. What security do I have for my family? I'd had this kind of freelance design job that I'd been doing while that was great for the lifestyle that we had, of backpacking and traveling and having this wonderful life of freedom. But now I was, going to be a dad. We didn't have any savings. I didn't have a home. And I started to get really worried about, security for my family. That was kind of 2015 going into 2016. There was a lot of negativity in the press. There was the Brexit thing. Donald Trump was coming to power in the States. A lot of the people I was hanging around with here in Barcelona were quite negative. I allowed myself to get into these Facebook chats and conversations that were negative. And all the anxiety came flooding back again. And along with like a crippling bad back. And so I went to this physio, and this physio said, listen, you haven't done any exercise for decades. Have you ever been into exercise? I said, yeah, I used to run, used to play football, loved it. And so she said, well, why don't you get back into running, get back into the gym and, start exercising again? That's going to help your back. So I started to do that. And at the same time, I thought, there's no way I'm going back to this kind of anxiety. I want to learn how to do it properly. So I started to research personal development. I found Tony Robbins, and I started to learn about habits and identity, beliefs and, behavior. And, my mum then passed away in 2018. And while I was speaking at her funeral, I saw all these people that I knew in front of me. And I thought, God, my mum, used to be this like pillar of our little community. And what she did best was like she helped everyone. You know, everyone that I could see in front of me would be someone that I recognized because she was a friend of the family, a friend of my mum's, that she would have helped in some way or another. And so I thought, what I really want to do is, you know, I'm on this new journey of discovery, this, you know, learning about personal development, learning about change, learning about getting healthy again at 40 years old when you've got a kid. And so I want to share it. So that's when I kind of started my website, Smashing 50, which is a website specifically for middle-aged men. And I made it for men rather than for everyone, because as I was doing my research, looking for information about, you know, personal development, about change, I found a lot of the information out there was targeted specifically for women. It felt a little bit kind of feminine, and I couldn't find an awful lot that was tailored to me. So I made this website all about, you know, specific for men, really. And I was still drinking at that time, so I'd started to run, and I'd started to go to the gym and exercise a little bit. And then my brother, who had just recently got divorced, said, "We're going to have an engagement party on your birthday back in the UK, back in North Wales. Why don't we make it a big party? You can fly over and it'll be a huge celebration." So I agreed with my wife, or my wife agreed with me, that she would actually stay here because my son was, you know, just a couple of years old then. She's like, "I don't want to come over the flight and everything. All that's going to happen is I'm going to be with the baby. The baby's going to go to bed. I'm not going to be there anyway. So why don't you go by yourself?" So I was like, brilliant. Okay, this is going to be great, but I'm not going to get completely wasted. You know, I have to remember, you know. But it was the first time I was in a couple of years that I'd had a bit of time to myself. So I flew over to the UK. We had this big party. All the family were there. All my friends were there. My brother's friends were there. And we had this big, huge joint party, and everyone started buying me drinks. And I had pints and pints and pints of Guinness. And then a couple of friends said, "Oh, our taxi's arrived. We've just brought a round. You just drink them." So I drank them.
How did you find being in that situation, Mike, right? When you set those boundaries for yourself socially, you're like, I'm not going to drink, then you get there and slowly those boundaries just get pushed and you end up drinking and drinking and drinking. What was it like trying to set out to do something and then not quite going to plan?
Well, the boundaries I set were probably paper thin, to be honest. You know, it was just more about saving face. You know, don't make a fool of yourself. You are free. But don't go overboard. Don't make this, you know, there are kids here. My niece is here. My brother's getting married. She has kids. You know, they were all kind of teenagers. But as soon as you've had a couple of pints, you know, as soon as you've had 3 pints, maybe, then someone brings you a fourth and you go, "Yeah, go on, and I'll have the fourth." And by the time you've done that, the limits that you've set yourself just don't exist anymore. At least for me, anyway. So then, what happened was a lot of people started to leave, and like I said, I finished this round of drinks that people had left because their taxi had arrived, and then I started walking around looking for bottles of wine that were on the tables, just trying to finish them off, and then found some helium balloons, tried to inhale the helium, and, you know, make these teenagers laugh by inhaling helium. And I do remember the looks on their face, which is like, what is this guy doing? You know, they didn't know me because it was the first time I'd met them, the children of my brother's new wife. And I thought I was, you know, the clown, and I thought I was making them laugh, and I was just completely hammered. So the next morning, I actually had to fly home back from Liverpool to Barcelona. I was completely hungover, and I was completely ashamed of myself, really. You know, my behavior, the way that I'd said to myself I wasn't going to get completely wasted, but did, the way that I'd acted in front of my niece, you know, that kind of behavior. I was like, what kind of an example was I setting to those kids? I felt rotten, not just physically because I had to get on an aeroplane. You know, I literally felt sick trying to, you know, when you're trying to stand up from your bed when you've had so much to drink and you just feel like you're going to be sick. I had to make my way to the airport in that kind of state, you know, get the bus, get the train, get to the airport, go through security, get on the aeroplane in that state, but constantly thinking to myself, what kind of example was I to those kids, and how did I let myself make such a fool of myself? And this was 2019, and my birthday is the 28th of September, so it was kind of coming up to October, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this sober October thing. I'm going to take a month off drinking. And the thought of doing that actually was terrifying, because all the way back to 2016, when I'd started, you know, drinking, to when I was 16, when I started drinking with my friends at school, then going to college, I was trying to piece together, and I was thinking, there hasn't been a period of time of more than a few days, let's say 5 days, where I haven't had a beer or a few beers, been to the pub or had a night out. So to go 28 days without drinking any alcohol, it was like, this is going to be almost impossible. So I did the Sober October thing, and I was really quite motivated because I'd had this horrible experience. It was still fresh in my mind, this complete mess I'd made of myself. And I was highly motivated because we were in Barcelona, because I've become a father recently. I was in a different environment. You know, I wasn't in that environment of being back in North Wales, bored with nothing to do. I was here in Barcelona. It's a different lifestyle. The weather's completely different. I didn't have so many friends. And so a lot of the time I was just being a dad. So I think environment, when it comes to alcohol, I think environment is massive. The environment that you live in, the people that you're hanging around with, even the environment that you find yourself in on a habitual daily basis. You know, you come home from work, you, whatever it is you might do, you eat the dinner, you put the stuff in the dishwasher, then you grab the bottle of wine and you sit down in your favorite chair and turn the telly on. You know, that environment, that habit is, you know, half of the problem. And it was for me as well, you know. We'd finish our day, we'd get my son to bed, and then I'd go out and buy a couple of cans and come back, and we'd drink them in the evening. You know, I managed to be here in Barcelona. I was out of that environment. And I started to do kind of while I was on that journey, I started to do some research about, you know, habits and beliefs and identity. And looking back through all of those different years, you know, there was an element of boredom. There was an element of not knowing what I was doing with my life. There was, of course, the environment. There was peer pressure. There was the fact that at every stage of my life, whether I was in college, whether I was in the village, whether I was at university or traveling or at work, alcohol was one of the, or if not the only outlet when it came to social time. So throughout, you know, the society, throughout the culture, and that was built into my identity. It's like, this is who I am. You know, I'm British. I'm a drinker. You know, and now that I don't drink, so sorry, I kind of finished Sober October, and I said, this kind of feels nice. I feel it wasn't like, you know, a completely different person, but it was like there's something different. I'm slightly less anxious. I feel slightly calmer, more focused. I've got more energy. And, you know, I'd started to exercise at the same time. So I was replacing, you know, old habits with new habits, eating a bit healthier, and started to feel a little bit better. So I'd done that Sober October, and I said, let's see if I can do to the end of the year. So I went to the end of 2019. I got to the end of 2019, and I thought, wouldn't it be a really cool challenge to try and go a year? So why don't I do 2020 without drinking alcohol? That turned out to be the year of COVID. So we all got locked down. And I think if I'd been drinking, that could have been quite destructive. But because, again, we were at home, I had my son. He was like 3 at the time. So it was a lot of hands-on work with a small boy. And, prior to that, when he was like 1 year old and I'd be waking up with a bit of a hangover after a few beers last night, I'd be a bit grumpy. And it's like, I want to be a better dad. I don't want to be grumpy. I want to play with him rather than just trying to give him something to do so I can rest. I want to be there for him. So I just continued through 2020. So I haven't drank since. I've had a couple of occasions where I thought, oh, I'll have a drink on someone's birthday or something like that, or at Christmas. So I had kind of one or two here and there. But I think I don't want to go back down that, slippery slope. I'm kind of enjoying where I am now more than anything. So I just kind of stuck to it. And now I'm 4 years without drinking. And there was no point where I thought that I was an alcoholic. And I don't really like the term alcoholic personally, because the work that I've done, the research that I've done about identity is about putting labels on people. We don't put a label on someone who's a heroin addict other than they're addicted to heroin. You can be addicted to alcohol. But personally, I think to label someone as an alcoholic, that they might carry that label with them for life, I think that's not so helpful. But I personally, I started to look at the beliefs that I had, and I'm talking to people here. It's an international community that I have here. I talk to people from Sweden and from Spain and from France and Germany, and a lot of people say, "Oh, there's no way I could quit drinking." I'm, insert nationality here. It could be Swedish or French or Canadian or whatever it is. And I think that it's quite sad, really, that when you think about Western culture and Western society, how our main focus for all society, for all events, is drinking, so that we all become this kind of connected to this identity of who we are. And it's like, that's who I am. I'm a British white man. I need to be a drinker. I need to drink with the lads so I can feel like I'm one of the lads. And again, it's to do with habits. It's to do with, well, I've got nothing to do now, or I want to relax, or I want to, I've had a hard day, I deserve this. There are, of course, the chemical things, that are happening to you when you have a drink of alcohol that, of course, will give you that little hit of dopamine super quick. Whereas if you, went for a run or went to the gym or did some meditation, you can still get those same kind of benefits, but in a much slower, kind of softer way. But of course, when you're using alcohol to relax or to reduce anxiety, as I was, you're always waking up the next morning with even more anxiety plus a hangover. So although alcohol feels like it's helping, it very rarely is helping. And I found that I was in such a catch-22, and in every environment that I turned to at every stage in my life, however kind of tough it was for me, it was causing anxiety. It caused me to get arrested. It caused me to end up in hospital a couple of times. But still, I kept on drinking because that was who I was. That was all I knew. And there was no kind of idea of anywhere else to turn, really.
And for you, Mike, how did you change your identity? How did you change into a different identity, and what's your identity now?
I think I kind of molded myself into somebody who takes their health and fitness really seriously. I'm a person who is always looking to be at my best, whether that's with my dad, as a dad, or as a husband, or at work. I've built a new set of goals. I'm constantly trying to improve myself and work towards goals. I've given myself that focus, if you like, and so my identity now is like, I don't have the feeling like doing anything because you had a couple too many. So I think, how was I able to change my identity? I think I was lucky because I was removed from the environment. So in that sense, I feel like, if you're able to move, I mean, not everyone can move themselves out of an environment because that's where they live and that's where they work. But just by changing your environment at home, some of the guys that I have spoken to, I have a little course on my website that helps people to take a break from alcohol. And some of the guys there were talking about, when we talked about habits and behavior, their habit of having a drink starts on their way home from work, and they don't even realize it. It's the way that they go home, and they stop at that particular shop, and that's when they pick up the beers, and that's when so when they get home and they put the kids to bed, the beers are already there. So I'm lucky that I changed the environment, but I think with the education I was giving myself about personal development, setting goals, being determined that I didn't want to be just another person who was, failing at life, and I wanted to set myself big goals and make a difference. So I had to kind of adapt this identity of someone who is able to do hard things, who is able to take control of, their habits and behaviors. I still go out occasionally with a group of friends, and they're having beers, and I'll have alcohol-free or just sparkling water. I don't mind doing that as long as it's, because I need to, you still need to have a social life, but it is hard. I play paddle now, play paddle tennis, I play five-a-side football, go to the gym, and I do my running. So occasionally I go running with a friend. So trying to build up a social life outside of the pub. But yeah, just being able to redefine my vision, redefine what goals, think about who I am as a person and what kind of man I want to be. And then asking myself what kind of actions that kind of man would take. Would that guy be the person who just goes, screw it, let's just go and have a few beers and forget about tomorrow's gym session or forget about tomorrow's run? I'm now at a point where I think, well, no, everything I'm doing as well is for my son. I want to be there. My main vision, my big goal, if you like, is to be, as fit as I can be when I'm 60, so that perhaps my son, when he'll be kind of, maybe 18. I can't do the maths on that right now, but I was 40 when he was born, so when he's 20, I'll be about 60, I think. So to be as fit as I can. So if we wanted to go and cycle around Europe or something, I'd be in that fit state. I want to be there for as long as I can, and be as fit as I can and as healthy as I can. And the more I learn about, the benefits of not drinking, the benefits of exercise and health, from a cognitive point of view, as well as a physical point of view, of flexibility and mobility, I don't want to go down that path anymore of just being the guy who sits around with a beer belly, not getting anything done because there's something I thought about actually yesterday, and that is when I used to watch an awful lot of football. So, in the village pub, Super Sundays and all that, drinking all day, watching the football. I now watch probably 2 or 3 games of football per season, and that's both the Merseyside derbies, plus maybe the Champions League final. And it's like, why would I waste so much of my time and my life drinking, watching these guys achieve their goals while I've either not even set myself any goals or I'm not working on them? So, I mean, to a lot of people, that might sound overly kind of, up yourself. But when I look back, I can see at every point in time, there was no kind of direction. My parents were great, but they weren't very good at giving me direction on what to do when I was 16, 17, 18, where to go to college or what to study. I had no idea. And, for a number of years as well, for a long, long time, I had no idea. There was no kind of direction. There was nothing that I was chasing after. And so in that kind of haze of, oh, let's, finish work and now let's just go to the pub and, chill out. You know, although for a lot of people, that's what they want. They want to go to work, they want to earn their money, and then they want to go and sit in the pub, relax, and just, that's it. But if you want to progress and make progress and, start to believe more in yourself, have more confidence in yourself, and set some new goals and boundaries and start meeting them, then I believe that, taking a break from alcohol or quitting alcohol completely is one of the best things you can do to give yourself that kind of time and energy, motivation, and remove all of that kind of negativity, anxiety, and all that kind of baggage that goes with it.
Yeah, yeah. And you have your alcohol-free experience, which is a 20-day, 28-day alcohol-free challenge. I just wondered if you could talk us through a bit about what happens in there and how people can find out a bit more about it.
So it's for middle-aged men. The reason why that is because, again, I did a lot of research on personal development websites and things that I found quite targeted towards women. Which is why I started Smashing 50. Then I looked at, as I was going through my own kind of alcohol-free period and trained to be alcohol-free, there were courses and there were communities, and predominantly the communities were women who were speaking out, women who were getting involved. I spoke to owners of some of the courses who said, probably 80% of our clients are women. And so I found that perhaps, what if there was one that was just for men? Maybe that would encourage men to come to the community and get involved and find other men who in another environment might not want to speak out so much. So it is for middle-aged men who feel like they're drinking too much and it's affecting their life and their health. And so the focus is on just taking a break for 28 days. And what we try and focus on is to build a gap and put some space between you and the habit and the behavior. Because like anything that's addictive, those first few days are really kind of, because alcohol is an addictive substance, the first few days are difficult to get through. But for most people, they realize that they haven't had their break from alcohol for a long time. So we try and build, what I call like a comfortable gap between you and the booze. And then while we're in that kind of space, we look at, what you were using, alcohol for. We also look at your identity and beliefs, your environment, your habits, and try and really focus on the positives, if you like, of, okay, so now that you're in this little gap, let's look at some, there are some tools there for overcoming, cravings and things like that. But it's not about focusing on, beating this kind of, this demon. It's about let's look at being in a positive space and let's look at how we can have better habits. And, so we talk about nutrition, we talk about health, we talk about drinking plenty of water and what you can do differently, how you can design your life differently, rather than always going back to alcohol to kind of solve your problems, whether that was, to be confident when you went out, or to, to relax after a hard day, or just to, because you deserved it, or whatever you were using alcohol for. So the idea is very much about, just looking at your beliefs, your identity, trying to shake that tree a little bit and say, well, are you that person, or do you have to be that person? Or could you be the person who, who is slightly different, who steps out of the norm, and instead of going to the pub 5 nights a week, you might go 1 night a week and have an alcohol-free beer, or to take up squash or five-side football or running or going to the gym. And so really just trying to shake people's tree, if you like, and, get them to think about differently and inspire them through the community that we've got, finding other people who are going through the same thing. And so it's been, just a little group so far that's been through there, and I've had some really positive results. And that's, you can find that at smashing50.com/AF-experience, I think. Perhaps I can send you a link.
Yeah, and everyone listening will link all of the links down in the description, so you can easily go and check out, that program with Mike, and definitely go ahead and check it out. And as we come towards the end, Mike, anything you want to leave the audience with? Any final comments you want to check out on?
I think I'd just like, if there was one piece of advice I could give and summarize all in one go, I think I would say that life without alcohol, although it probably seems quite scary, it might seem like, well, that's going to be completely boring. If you give it a chance, if you allow yourself to, take that step and give it just a break, just the concept is not on quitting for good. I mean, if I said, right, you're going to quit for good now, that's it, that's your last drink, I think most people would say, no, I'm not doing that. But this idea that, well, let's just have an extended break, use a community, find a friend, do it together. I think some accountability is really good. And just allow yourself to have a break and explore what life can be like without alcohol, and look at different ways to kind of scratch your itches, your anxiety, or, needing to relax, get rid of stress. Try and explore, while you're in that little gap, some different ways of scratching those itches. Then you might just find that at the end of a short break, that life can be quite different when you're not constantly under the kind of fog of alcohol. Yeah,
amazing. I couldn't agree more. It's good to start off, with just having those 28 days, not drinking, not stopping drinking forever. Like, we don't like that. That's really scary. It's good just to stop for a period of time, for 28 days, see how you feel. And like you or I, we kind of continued on after those 28 days, which some people may do, but just to really kind of have that as the goal and the focus, which is amazing. So thanks very much for coming on the show, Mike. It's been a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.